There you are.
Hi. So, okay. So basically I wanted to kind of get this started. Like, there's going to be a few other people hopefully chiming in, but this might be a quick discussion. Who knows? So basically I was getting a lot of new deals in that involved buying new construction in a new subdivision. And there's a whole lot of stuff that it's sort of a whole new ball of wax when you start looking at that stuff, because the seller is a developer, and a lot of the stuff is going to come across as being anti-developer, and it's really not meant to be, but it's just sort of from experience. Things you want to try to hold them accountable for that they'd rather not be held accountable for. And there it's just see one other person. Caller, are you there? So anyway, that's kind of why I wanted to do this, because I think there's a lot of different sort of questions that you can ask as a buyer's agent to kind of take you through the process and educate your buyer about what they're getting into. And that's sort of why I set up the flyer the way I did. It's sort of questions that you can ask and hopefully get answers to when your buyer is buying, because there's a lot of attorneys sort of want to gear toward the developer. I tend to work more with individuals. So basically the major differences. The major differences between that you're going to see here is sort of the by right subdivision and the special permit subdivision. So the subdivisions, as they go, a by right subdivision basically means like a developer owns, say, 12 acres of land, and in that town, they're allowed, say, 1 acre zoning, or they're allowed to build a house on 1 acre or a half acre, right? And they want to subdivide the land. So it becomes 8 different, let's say they can build 8 houses there, and they need to subdivide the land. So then it becomes 8 different lots that get sold off. So if it's a by right subdivision, it means that the developer has the right to do that just by virtue of the fact that they own the property where it's at. Cindy, are you there? Anyway, so if you see, so that, like, picture sort of your basic subdivision. So picture like road, flat yards, no trees, 1 acre, pretty cookie cutter looking neighborhood. That's probably a standard subdivision, because they didn't get any special permit to build houses on a lot smaller than that. So there are ways that they can build, meaning the builder can build more houses, or build on smaller lots than that. So that's basically, that would be sort of the second type, which is a special permit subdivision. So typically a special permit is approved by the local planning board. So this is kind of how I came to know this stuff. I was on the Marshfield Planning Board for like 5 or 6 years, and towards the end, at the end of my term, I was the chair. So part of our job was we would approve subdivisions, and if someone came to us with a special permit, that's the kind of thing that we would sort of hear about or talk about. So like in Marshfield, for instance, they have like an open space special permit. Has anyone ever heard of that? An open space special permit, OSRD. Basically, it means you as the builder would be allowed to build on less than an acre or a half acre. And if you left like a certain amount of space as open or untouched. So so basically that's the kind of thing that you would look at in a subdivision. So subdivisions like that, they look a little more jammed in, and the houses look a little more, you're building a house at that point, maybe on like 5,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet. And that's the kind of thing that you would look at if you were dealing with a special permit. So you either get your standard subdivision or a special permit subdivision. Special permits are becoming more popular as land becomes more scarce. So that's something that you definitely want to pay attention to. Looking down the little chain of questions here, does anyone have any questions about like affordable housing? There'll always be there could be, hi Cindy, how are you? That if you want, this is recording. So
That's okay. I'll play the recording back. Don't.
all right, fair enough. So has anyone had an experience with any affordable buyers who qualify for affordable housing?
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that a little bit?
I don't have a lot of experience with it, but it was a 55 plus subdivision, so that they had to go through the Affordable Housing Commission to actually get approved. And the commission was reduced. You know, they had a lower quality unit than the others. I mean, the finishes were lower quality.
Okay, it's actually not. That's sort of against the nature of the thing. No, it's fine. That's if that was your experience, then that was real. But affordable housing, like you're not supposed to see a difference between the affordable housing unit and the other units. So if you buy in a new affordable housing or a place with like an affordable unit, you're not supposed to be able to tell the difference. That's part of the equal housing thing. So like, let's say, does anyone here have any experience in Norwell, Maplewood Estates? Has anyone had a client buy in there?
No.
Okay. Maplewood Estates, if you drove through it, those houses range in price like in the 800,000 price, like 700, 800. And that's an affordable unit. That's a 40B development. What's interesting about that place is if you drove through there, you would think that it was, a subdivision with colonials, 4-bedroom houses, 3 4-bedroom single family houses with garages and all that other stuff that everyone looks for. But those are condos. They look like standalone houses, but they're condominiums, and they're affordable. So a portion of them are affordable. And if you drive through there, you wouldn't see the difference, which is really interesting. So you need to know if your buyer is buying an affordable unit or not, which, like you just sort of talked about, Cindy, you would know because they would have to be approved. And affordable basically just means that it's and I didn't mean to jump on you about that, but it's really good that you brought that point up, because from a fair housing standpoint, you're not supposed to know the difference. So it's affordable, I think, is like 80% of the median income. Do you recall what they had to qualify for?
It was several years back. I'm not.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, and that's overseen by Mass Housing, or what's called the DHCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, the DHCD. So that's what those things are overseen for. The next thing is you want to see if the development is in what's called a Water Resource Protection District, WRPD. So the point of this discussion is to make you guys sound smart. So we can all sound smart. So we can throw around some jargon. So the WRPD basically is some towns chose to enact a water resource protection bylaw, which basically says that this section of town we want to protect the water in. So the reason why this is important is sometimes it can really limit what kind of wastewater treatment they have. So if you have a 4-bedroom or a 3-bedroom house, then you have to stick to that because it's part of the WRPD. So in other words, it's a deed restriction. Like the number of bedrooms you have can be a deed restriction under the subdivision permit approval, and they can also even limit what people can use on their driveway, what kind of like for rock salt and stuff, and what kind of fertilizer they can use for the yard. So if you're in a water resource protection district, you definitely want to know about it, because it'll impact your buyer's, you know, living experience moving forward. And none of this stuff is sort of there to scare the buyer off. It's just stuff that they should know about. New construction. I mean, how many people have dealt with new construction? Gina, I know you're coming at this from a different angle, but Debbie, you've had people buy new construction, right?
I haven't, but I have 2 new construction homes coming on in
Okay.
Hanover. So I was looking at it from the other end. That's why
Yeah.
I wanted to be part of it.
Yeah, that you're listing. Okay.
I have 2 coming on. Yeah.
Oh, great. Do you know if it's a special? I mean, you don't have to divulge too much, but you know if it's a special permit or a standard, or is it part of a subdivision, or are they individual?
It's not part of a subdivision.
Okay.
No, it's just 2. My client bought the lot, and it was 2 lots. There were 2 small little homes on it. Took them down and just built 2 houses.
Nice. Good. I mean, so the time, so that's gonna be a little different from what we're talking about, but generally speaking, the timing, if it's in I would say that if it's in a subdivision, they sort of have the building process down, and depending on how the sort of project has gone along, they have a pretty good idea of when they can finish things. You know, the timing of it all. So I mean, so sort of the rule of thumb is, you know, add like 60 days from when the closing is, you know, maybe supposed to be, unfortunately, because especially now, you know, permitting is delayed and subs and stuff like that. So that's all stuff that we definitely want to be aware of as we work with our buyers. And just in speaking of buyers, I mean, does it, you know, new construction might not be for every buyer. I mean, if you have folks that want to want to live in a brand new house because they don't want any hassle, right? Sometimes the process of getting a new house built is a hassle. You know, so we want to make sure that we sort of prepare people for that, but they just got to kind of stick with it, stay in the game. Again, the seller wants to sell the property as much as the buyer wants to buy it. So that's part of it. But yeah, so that sort of lends itself to new construction, the timing, the process of the street approval. So this is what's interesting. Some towns just do not approve new roads. They haven't approved a new road in however long. So, and they're simply not doing it. So what does that mean?
Yeah.
So what does that mean, right? So maintaining the road, I mean, what do you think of when you think of maintaining the road? Plowing.
I know a subdivision in Weymouth that's privately owned. I just don't understand that at all. But
Yeah, it's odd. So here's kind of how it works a little bit, and they differ more than they should. But basically, the street has to be approved by the town. So it has to be like built to certain standards. It has to be a certain width. It has to be a certain height. It can only be so much on a curve. It has to be built in a certain location so that the planning board approves it. But then it's up to the Department of Public Works to accept it. And by accepting it, that means it becomes a public road and the town maintains it. Those are 2 different things. So every road that gets built in town has to be approved by the planning board, particularly in a subdivision. So it's built to certain standards, like I said, but then if it remains private, if the town doesn't accept it, it gets handed over to the homeowners association, to the HOA, and then the HOA are the ones who maintain it. Maintain it meaning plowing and stuff like that. Now, that's technical. as a practical matter, the town cannot allow for any home to not have emergency access, particularly in a snowstorm. So towns do tend to plow those roads, but every once in a while you see something on a, you know, in an HOA that says that the folks have to chip in and pay to have the road paved and maintained and stuff like that. But I would say that as a practical matter, the town will allow, in order to provide access to those homes, the town will plow. But then that's something that you probably want to pay attention to. You want to see how the basically how the HOA docs read, and also pay attention to when the developer may be out of there. So the homeowners association only takes the road over once the developer is done. The developer is done when the last house is sold, and they still have sometimes a little bit of time to finish up the project. But any questions so far? I mean, these are probably things. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So do the homeowners know prior to signing the PNS whether it's going to be, you know, whether the HOA is going to take it over or the town is?
They sure should. I mean, I've had clients
decided prior to.
Yeah, I mean this is something you probably want to ask at the initial stage, you know, at the what do they call it? And instead of an offer, they have a reservation, right? Yeah. So this is probably a conversation that you want to have at the reservation stage, and invariably, the builder will say, "Oh, we fully expect the town to take a road." Ask when the last time a town took a road. Or accepted a road. In the town I'm sitting in right now, they haven't accepted a road since 1995. So, you know,
Is that?
Marshfield, USA.
Oh.
So you want to know, and that they're not unlike other towns, you know, in many ways. So I would ask that, you know, when's the last time a town the town accepted a road? There's a difference between approved and accepted. But yeah, and then check out the HOA docs, and you may see your standard basic HOA. You can Google it and print it up, and that's your HOA documents. You know, you probably want something a little bit more involved than that. You know, the HOA agreements. So. And speaking of HOA agreements, the major thing that I look at when I look at those for people is sort of the stuff that's going to impact their life. You know, what the rules are, if they can have commercial, you know, vehicles in the place, if they can have like certain types of plants and stuff like that. Like how nasty, or not how nasty, but how much power does the HOA have? I mean, I've seen them where you have to get all your plants approved by the HOA. You have to, you know, you can only have so many guests for so long approved by the HOA. So, but sort of the major rule of thumb that I tell people is, you know, if you like how the place looks, then just keep it looking like that, right? I mean, if you're gonna offer to buy a place, then you probably like the way it looks. So if you like it, then just keep it looking like that. But has anyone come across anything onerous or odd? Has anyone had the HOA have to meet? Yeah, go ahead, Jeannie.
It wasn't a new build, but we bought, I helped buyers in Foxborough, I'm sorry, in Sharon, but they were so close to the Foxborough line that the development was tied into the Foxborough sewer system, but they paid a monthly fee, but there was some sort of, not a septic, but a pumping system in the development, and it caused some weird stuff with lending that we sorted out, but it was just kind of an odd thing I hadn't seen before.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, it can be, it can get, they can get creative, you know, with wastewater.
Mhm.
I mean, I think the priciest thing is to tie into town sewer. But the individual, if you've got a section of town that's individual septics, then yeah, then that's something that has to be dealt with. So I had one here. We worked on one here where they were in the water resource protection district, and they could only have so many bedrooms because of the loading, and the developer kept coming back to us and changing. They had so many 3-bedroom houses and so many 4-bedroom houses, right? So which is going to sell? 4, right? So they kept coming back to us because every time they were trying to basically sell a 3-bedroom house, the client said, well, we really want a 4-bedroom house. So they would then try to change. Okay, I know that, lot 6 was a 3-bedroom house before, but we want to change it to a 4-bedroom house, and we'll make another one a 3-bedroom house that we'll try to sell. So eventually, you're going to run out of bedrooms. So yeah, so I mean, if you can tie into town sewer, it's great, but especially in a water resource protection district like that, Title V is definitely a very, very real thing.
Mhm.
I do have in there paragraph 10 of the PNS agreement. Does everyone kind of know? I know that it's sort of something that I deal with every day, but maybe not everyone else. Does everyone have that language sort of at the ready, or not really? No?
No.
So paragraph 10, I'm gonna forward it. It's gonna look really long. Gina. Okay, so I'm forwarding you, and I'll kind of walk you through it. So I'm forwarding you some pretty god-awful language. It looks like a whole lot, but basically, paragraph 10 is the part of the purchase and sale agreement that basically says, hey, if the seller can't perform, or if the seller can't deliver the property, then they get an automatic 30-day extension, right? In a regular purchase and sale agreement situation, we take that to mean that we're going to limit that to just title issues, okay? But how a developer will take it, or how I've seen developers take it or interpret it, is to say, and if you have it in front of you, do you have a second to bring it up in front of you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Reading it.
So we've got what looks like some pretty horrible language. If the seller shall be unable to give title or make conveyance or to deliver the premises, yak, blah, blah, all as stipulated herein. So it's that part right there, okay? Or if at the time of the delivery of the deed, the premises do not conform to the provisions hereof. So the seller, the builder can say, well, geez, I'm not done building, right? I can't deliver the premises. Hey, I get another 30 days right away. Yay me, right? What we usually do, if it's just the seller to buyer, if the seller is an individual, buyer is an individual, what we usually do is we add a provision in our rider. Everyone loves the attorney's rider, the attorney's rider, right? In the rider, you can put a provision that says we're going to limit paragraph 10 to just title issues, because that's really what it should be, right? So a builder or a developer doesn't want that sort of limit. So what I would suggest, and what I try to work in, is basically something that says, you'll always get the pushback. You'll always try to say, okay, we're just going to limit this to title concerns, and then they'll come back and say, well, what if we can't build? What if we can't get our permits and stuff like that? Which is totally reasonable. You want to cap that. So you want to basically say, but in no event later than X. So if I were signing a purchase and sale agreement this week, and we were looking to close at the end of September, right? I would say, but in no event later than Well, what do we think? We're all seasoned people here. New construction, closing at the end of September. What do we think? If we're giving the seller a 30-day extension, is December too late? To say in no event can we extend beyond the end of December?
Sounds fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
November?
doesn't it kind of go with what the buyers can handle?
Yeah.
If they have to be out of someplace or
Yeah.
in the meantime.
Yep. Jeannie, what do you think?
I think it depends on the buyers as well. I think it depends on how long their like rate, they have rate locks maybe and things like that in place as well. So I don't know. During COVID too, I'm helping a buyers right now with new construction, and although they deemed housing necessary, suppliers were having a hard time getting some stuff in for like kitchens and flooring and whatever else. So I'm really not sure.
It's hard to know. I mean, that you bring up a great question. So if we're booking now, right, and we're supposed to close at the end of September, and we give a October, November, December extension, that's what, 90 days? And let's say we lock in our financing 2 weeks prior to closing. So that's 100 and, how's my math? That's 104 days, right? Does anyone know of a lender that offers a 104-day, rate lock extension?
No.
So, we want to coach our so I try to coach my buyers and my lenders on sort of when they actually lock that interest rate.
Mm-hmm.
And we've all had sort of those things kind of blow up in our face, right? Where suddenly it costs more money. And also what's going to be in the purchase and sale agreement is the caveat that, hey, that the seller's not going to pay for any financing contingency extensions. So what about the loan approval process in general? I mean, the process happens pretty quick. If the place hasn't been built yet, the lender's initial approval is based on spec. And what if the place isn't built to spec? The buyer's finance contingency has come and gone. So let's say again we have our closing October 30, and we have a financing contingency of October 1, right? And or even before that, let's say we have it September 15. How do we build something in that protects the buyer if the house isn't built to spec? What do you think, Gina? What do you think?
Oh, you put me on the spot.
Yeah.
I don't.
Isn't that where you come in, Mike?
It is, yeah. So I would add in language to the purchase and sale agreement that basically says that if the finished product varies from the specs to the point where it impacts the buyer's financing, then basically the date of performance gets moved so that the building can be brought into compliance. So there's sort of,
Say that again.
I would say that well, we're talking about a contract, right?
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
talking about a date of performance. So the date of performance is sort of the point where the buyer is going to be hurt. If the buyer's financing contingency has come and gone, the date of performance has arrived, but the buyer can't perform because the place wasn't built as it was supposed to be.
Right.
The only thing protecting a buyer could be a paragraph or a provision that says if the building differs from the specs to the point where it impacts the lender's ability to lend, then the date of performance gets moved. Which
allows them time to get it in spec. I get it. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
So the property can be brought into conformity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a thing. I mean, you can have language that says if it doesn't conform, then you can cancel the deal altogether. Sellers don't tend to like that. And frankly, nobody tends to like that. And that's not what the buyer wants. So you would just basically carve something out that says that you would extend it. I can send out that language if you want. How much flexibility do you usually have on the, let's say you're making an initial reservation on like a new house. How much I'm actually not part of that process. So that's similar to the offer. How much flexibility do you have in those reservations? Usually, Debbie, have you put one together, a reservation like that, or no?
No, I haven't done any new construction. I haven't had any buyers buy new construction.
Well, let's say on your listing, you've got someone that wants to give you a reservation. How much would you liken it to an offer, or do you think your builder would be like it's a take it or leave it type thing?
I don't know. We don't even have it on the market yet. It's kind of beginning stages, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. All right. So that's probably something to find out, because I think that you probably would have some flexibility. Colleen was there in the end to the financing contingency that basically says, it's starting to tell me my internet is unstable. Love it. I would work something into the financing contingency that says, subject to, final compliance with lender, with specs or something like that. That's not going to be a stretch. For the most part, the builder builds what they set out to build. So I don't think that that's going to be, that's going to be really much of an issue, but it is something you want to pay attention to. What about conservation? So there's conservation, there could be conservation restrictions in a subdivision. So like if something gets built near wetlands, or if something gets built near conservation land and it requires Conservation Commission approval, then you could see like a fence, some sort of stockade fence. So here's what happens a lot of times. You have a subdivision lot, right? And there's a certain section that cannot be touched. And actually, it's nice to have just a small group of you here, because I'm going to send over a nice example of this. Because I had a client recently buy a place down on the Cape, and he was very concerned about sort of what his lot was going to back up to. And we took a long time looking at like the easements and stuff that were there. Let me just take a quick look. So that bramble and brush and stuff that's back there, and you sort of think, okay, that's my yard and I can cut it as much as I want, even though you own that lot in the subdivision, there might be a conservation restriction there. So if the approving board or the town doesn't request or require that the builder put up some kind of fence or like some sort of thing making it very clear, hey, you can't go past here, then builders really aren't going to do it. But that's because just because it costs money. They're not doing anything wrong. It just costs money. So so what we would try to do is have some sort of fence or physical barrier to say, hey, listen, past here, yes, you own it, but it's got a conservation restriction. So if you've got a conservation restriction in your subdivision, that's something you definitely want to ask about. Are there any conservation restrictions to sort of the outer layer?
Yeah, I got it.
Everyone's got it? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So my buyer was buying lot 7, right? And this is actually a good thing to look at here, because he's got a lot of stuff going on here, right? He's buying 2 lots, 1 house, vegetated buffer strip at the end. So what was super interesting about this is he actually found I'm gonna try to admit Colleen. He actually found the article from like the local newspaper about the fight that the developer had with the neighbors, and learned that this was the settlement. This little vegetated buffer strip here that wasn't quite long enough wasn't quite as small as the developer wanted or as large as the neighbors wanted, was like the consolation prize that they got. So his concern was he wanted to build this pool that's marked by the little pink strip here.
Mhm.
So his concern was, is his pool going to fit, right? So he's got this vegetated buffer strip here. Now he can't touch that buffer strip, but he owns to the back of the lot. So this is the kind of thing that we sort of look at here. So he also has a drainage easement up front, which he
Right.
cannot build on. So his concern was, is the pool going to fit? It is going to fit. So we wound up moving forward. But this is actually a good thing to look at, because this is the type of little plan that we want to make sure that our buyers are on board with when they buy the place. So we want to know about easements, fees, and deed restrictions. So deed restrictions, so all of this stuff that we've been talking about all along can be codified, to use a legal term. Codified basically just means like it's in place for everybody. So if it's codified, it's part of the code, part of the law. If something is a deed restriction, then it's on there for everyone to deal with. So if you've got a deed restriction for how many bedrooms you can have, if you've got a deed restriction for how much you can build into the vegetated buffer zone, if you've got a deed restriction for affordable housing, then that's a restriction that impacts everyone. So that's also something that we want to make sure that we're aware of at that initial stage, because those deed restrictions don't constitute. So I'm going to sort of legalize it first, and then I'll try to those deed restrictions don't constitute title problems. So like again, going back to paragraph 10, to the language in paragraph 10, if there's a title problem, then that's sort of the ultimate out, right? As we all kind of know that. Like if there's a title problem, none of us wants it, but if there's a title problem, it's sort of the ultimate, okay, we just can't move forward. And there's no time where that runs out. So the morning of closing, you can have a title problem, and you're basically over with. But like a deed restriction or an easement, those things aren't title problems, but they're new. So they're new and they're specific to these properties. So we want to make sure that our buyers are okay with them. And for the most part, like you'll see, so when these folks built Hunter Rise, if you look at this little plan here, when these folks built Hunter Rise, they realized, okay, the way the storm, it's part of like stormwater management. It's part of like when the rain falls, okay, where's the rain gonna go? It's not gonna go through the street. It's gotta come over here, and okay, it's gonna impact lot 7, right? So we have a little drainage easement there, which basically says, hey, if your lot gets wet, then it's allowed to. It doesn't constitute an issue. And the little vegetated buffer strip back there, that might be something the buyer doesn't want to live with, but he's going to have to, because it doesn't make your title bad.
Mhm.
So those aren't, so when you sign a purchase and sale agreement, when you sign a contract, paragraph 4 of it, and I know we sort of, I don't know to what extent you have it in front of you, but paragraph 4 of the purchase and sale agreement, the next time you look at it, it basically says that the seller has to solve all title problems except, and it's usually A through F. And the title problems include things like, current easements, current restrictions, you have to pay taxes, stuff like that. So those aren't necessarily those aren't necessarily things that the buyer can assert as an issue, but they have to accept the property that way. So we just want to make sure that they're on board with that. Now, the buyer actually brought this to my attention. He was a pretty astute guy, and he said, okay, what does all this mean? And the fact that he found a newspaper article about it was pretty hilarious. So just stuff like that to be aware of, and whether or not the HOA is going to have any fees, if it's an established association versus a new association. So these are just sort of the little flyer here that I try to put together is just sort of a guide to what people can, some questions that you can ask. Also, warranties. We didn't really get into warranties. Just ask if there's a builder's warranty. That's definitely a good thing. And the holy grail of new construction is getting what's called a C of O, certificate of occupancy. So once you have that certificate of occupancy, what it should mean is that all of these things are all set with the town. So if you potentially could have a lot of involvement with town boards for these things. So you've got you have a planning board involved. You could have the DPW involved for the road maintenance. You could have the Conservation Commission involved. You could have the Fair Housing, or like the local town housing trust, or the housing committee or something like that involved if you have an affordable component. And a lot of those other committees answer to the Board of Selectmen. So sometimes the Board of Selectmen could be involved a little bit. But yeah, so you've got some stuff happening with the town, and there's a whole approval process that they go through. And that stuff it's pretty standard to have in the offer, contingent on the approval of the town for all the different things that have to be approved of, for. So I sort of talked about a lot, and I threw a lot of jargon at you. But any follow-up questions or anything?
Super helpful.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I would say the major things to pay attention to is whether or not the town's going to take the road, how involved the HOA is. I would look at timeframes, and probably I would say the most telling thing, if there are houses already standing, knock on a door.
Mm-hmm.
And ask them what the experience was like with the builder, and you'll either hear some real good things or some not so good things.
Right.
And that, and even from a builder's perspective, that's going to be what people do. People they'll kind of poke around the neighborhood, and they'll knock on the door and say, hey, because every closing is going to have some kind of a punch list, right? The doorknobs are wrong, the floor maybe got installed wrong and it buckled, or the light bulb's wrong, or whatever. Everything is going to have some kind of a punch list. And the people will be very honest about how the builder was dealing with that punch list. So it's a good thing to know. So I honestly, I think this is going to start coming up a lot, because what do we have right now? We have an inventory shortage, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's going to be a big movement to get new construction going, to get new subdivisions built. You're going to see some environmental things change. You're going to see some development possibly loosen up, or land be buildable where it wasn't buildable before. You might see a lot where 10 houses were allowed, suddenly they can build 15 houses. I wonder what's going to happen with office buildings now.
They're gonna be empty.
If they're empty, if they're going to get condoed out, if they're going to become housing, if they're going to get converted into condominiums, and that way you're looking at this type of thing, but not necessarily for
Commercial.
for commercial, or for residential, or for affordable, or apartments or whatever. I mean, who knows? There's still a housing shortage, and we could be hitting a situation where we have more office space than we need, especially down here. So So that's kind of the discussion that I had planned. I wanted to make sure that you sort of had the questions to get into your hands, but obviously, you know, if anything else comes up, you can give me a call. I shot you a couple of emails during the conversation, and you can reach out. But any other questions to wind it down?
Not for me.
Okay.
No.
All right. Well, I
Thank
know
you
there was
so
only a
much.
few of us, but I'm glad we had the conversation.
Yeah, no, it was helpful. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
Good.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, guys, take care.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Bye.